Today on the Egg Whisperer Show, we're returning to a topic that we know matters: male fertility. Because half of all infertility cases involve male factor, and it's still not covered enough. The title of today's show is A Deeper Look at Male Fertility: What Men and Women Need to Know, with guest David Ireland. Often, women are the ones undergoing testing and treatment, while male fertility is delayed and ignored. Sometimes it's only after months or even years that a couple finds out the issue is never with her. My guest today is David Ireland, the founder of Fertility for Men, a platform he created after years of navigating unexplained infertility himself. What he discovered was that there is a gap in medical information, emotional support, and in clear guidance for men. Since then, he's been on a mission, like me, but to provide men with real tools, science-backed information, and a sense of community. He's also behind the 5-day Fertility Kickstart Challenge, a free resource designed to help men take daily, doable steps to improve their reproductive health. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much for inviting me to the show today.
It's my pleasure. Your work in male infertility started with a deeply personal journey. Can you share that with us and tell us what finally led you to seek answers?
Sure. So my journey, actually, me and my wife's journey started quite a few years ago. We were actually living in Australia, Sydney, Australia at the time. And it would have been around the end of, about 2015. We decided, we were in our 30s. Now is a great time to try for a family. Why not? We had tried like most couples do. And for some reason, it was taking longer than what we imagined. We thought, hey, 5-6 months, it would work. And it didn't work for us. And it was only towards 2016, we actually went to a clinic in Sydney and we just did some testing. And then I found out I had oligospermia, which is a low sperm count. When he told me, I said, oh, I didn't think anything of it at the time, to be honest, Amy. I was like, okay, what does that mean? And he said to me, basically, you have about 12 million sperm count. You're not particularly swimming very well. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, you may understand it as sperm being potentially drunk and they're not fast enough to actually flow and fertilize an egg. So I sat there and thought, well, this is a bit odd. Then he started talking about, okay, well, I think, it's not working. I think we need to look into IVF. And we'd be like, whoa, what's going on here? And it kind of took us by shock, to be honest. We're young, we're in our 30s, we don't smoke. We drink, but very rare. We used to go to the gym nearly every other day. We ate a great diet. We had a great lifestyle in Australia. So we're kind of questioning, how does this happen? We moved back home to the UK and we continued to try and have a family. And not long after we arrived, we went to quite a few clinics in the UK and we had spent quite a lot of money just to get different consultations. And long before we actually decided to go through some IVF treatment, me and my wife, and came back all those years ago, Amy, it was actually quite horrific. More so for my wife because she's the one who's having to go through all the procedures of injecting herself with the needles and taking medication. You have strict deadlines in terms of when you take something. And then we had all our friends around us who have families as well. So we were kind of the only ones left having a family around us. So our journey has been somewhat very stressful, I think, over trying for 8 years. We spent a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of resource just to try and still find out the answers why. And no one really gave us the answers why. Then we kind of fell into the category of what they call unexplained infertility, which is where we are today. And I'm happy to share more around the story. But I do remember something that really kind of I still dread to think about was when the doctors first took my wife away on the bed to say, hey, we're going to do egg collection. I actually broke down because I didn't know what to expect. This is all new to me, new to my wife. They say women are stronger than men, and she had the bright face on and I'm going for this. But behind closed doors, as soon as she went, that was it. I was crying my eyeballs out because I couldn't believe what was happening. Like, why us? And today we do have some embryos, healthy embryos. For now, we decided to put everything on hold. But I think we've got to a level of comfort as well, Amy, to know There's a reason why it hasn't worked. And we're one of many, many couples out there in the world who are also going through their own struggles of trying to conceive as well.
Right. Well, I'm so glad you're able to talk about it despite how hard it was and it has been. And I'm obviously rooting for you and those embryos so that you
Thank you
guys
so
are
much.
successful and the parents that you want to be. So thank you for coming on and sharing so honestly with us today. So, when it comes to male factor, and we know that it plays a role in about 50% of infertility cases, and it
Mm.
doesn't get equal attention, and we know that stigma can play a role. What do you think is going on around the lack of testing and understanding?
The 50% of male factor is really important because generally men don't think that they have an issue. They believe it's not them, it's their partner or it's their wife that have the issue. So why should they actually be involved on that journey? And I think that's where the issue lies fundamentally is we both have an equal part to play in terms of our fertility. I think there is a big stigma around that, to be honest, because things like shame, not knowing. There's a shame of, we haven't had a family yet, and then you say, well, actually, we're not ready for a family, but actually, you can't have a family,
Right.
and you need to be true to yourself that it's never going to be easy when you're on that journey. There's always the emotional side that people tend to hide, particularly around certain friends. So if you're a guy, for instance, you may be in a pub with your mates, but how many guys actually talk around their infertility? Probably very, very few men. Whereas I think women are very comfortable sharing with their friends that, hey, I'm trying for a kid, it's not happening. And then they'll go, yeah, I've been through IVF. They go, oh, really? I didn't know that. And then it becomes quite more of an open forum where women are very comfortable sharing about their own experiences. But for men, there is a bit of a shame into, I don't want to talk about my fertility. And I think partly is because men have egos, right? So men are, well, are seen as, we're big and strong. We can't have issues. We won't admit that we've got an issue. When actually 1 in 6 couples globally have problems conceiving. So I think men need to start paying attention to their health, start paying attention to their partners or their wives to realize it's not just you, it could potentially be me.
Right.
And they need to do more in terms of trying to get some answers for themselves.
Yeah. And then obviously, you guys have, it sounds like you're incredibly close. You're very supportive of one another on this journey. What's the most helpful thing from your perspective a man can do to support his partner on this journey?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to do is be there for one another. I think from a male's point of view is really kind of understand the awareness of what's happening around you and around what's happening to your wife or your other third partner or your wife. And you need to be there to support her. You need to be there. You need to find some time to support yourself. So I think you need to find mechanisms that help you as an individual. And I always find if you can't help yourself, you can't help anybody else fundamentally. So for instance, what we do, we meditate. Meditation is really important in terms of how we start our day. We also go to the gym. We used to go to the gym with each other as well. So I think providing that support, that encouragement, and doing things that kind of distract you from overthinking too much about that. And I think, it kind of helps you move forward with, it may not happen now, but let's think about the future and what that future could look like. So you may want to give your wife a massage or go shopping together, go on holiday together. There's also the emotional support as well, knowing when she needs to vent or she needs some time on her own potentially as well. And I think part of that is really understanding who your partner is. You made a commitment to each other if you're married. So part of that should be, I want to be there for you no matter what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So be there, show up, go to the appointments, understand what she's going through, the medications she's on. I mean, that's I love it when the male partner shows up. He's in the office, he's on the new patient calls, he's joining us on video. I think that's extremely important. When I see patients that are alone and I never meet the partner until the egg retrieval day, I feel like the experience from the on the patient side is not as good compared with the experience that she would have if her partner was showing up at each and every visit. So that's very helpful advice.
Absolutely. As you just said, I think about that and it kind of horrifies me to know that, guys will just turn up, You've got to give a semen sample and, hey, I'm gone.
Right.
But there's more to it than that. So I
There
think that's
really
for you
is.
to kind of really be in tune with your partner.
Yeah. I want to talk about testing a little bit. And some guys are reluctant to get testing.
Hmm.
So what kind of advice would you have for a guy who's reluctant to even do a semen analysis?
So again, it comes down to egos and men not thinking that they have an issue. I think they need to kind of acknowledge that fear to some degree and change that mindset. It's
Mhm.
all about mindset. And I think for guys, they really need to think about, okay, well, what can I do today to put myself in that right frame of mind to know I need to go and get tested. I need to go and get tested earlier. And by testing earlier, Amy, you're actually ruling out the women having to go through all these procedures and spending thousands of pounds or dollars for no reason. And it happens so much where you'll go to a clinic and a lot of clinics would only just test the women and go, great, let's go. You guys go and give me your load, give me your semen test, and that's it. We're ready to go. But I think we need to take a step back and really think about what else are we doing?
Right.
How else are we kind of supporting our partners through that?
Right.
And I think there's so many different things you can do to prepare yourselves for that. And I think, men really need to identify themselves that they could be the person with all the issues, and testing is so important. And having a semen test doesn't take long to do. It's very, very quick, and it will give so many markers to the doctors, which will then kind of suggest what can we do next to move forward. There's so many things that men may have that may not get diagnosed until later on, particularly if you haven't gone through all the testing. And a good example I can relate back to myself. So I had so many tests within the first couple of years, but what I didn't realize in the first few years was that I had something called a varicocele. And sometimes I say that to men and people are like, what's a varicocele? And then I have to explain what a varicocele is. Like, oh my God, do I know I've had that? And maybe, potentially, and it is quite common. So 15% of men are actually born with a varicocele. And for those who don't know what a varicocele is, it's basically I call it a lump of veins in usually the left testicle, just above the left testicle. And it's because blood pools within the testes and it actually heats the testes up and that actually kills sperm. Basically, in a nutshell, that's what it does. So I think if men are thinking about getting tested, you need to ask the right questions. And part of that is, yes, going for a semen analysis. Equally, I would encourage men to also see a urologist because they would then do that diagnosis to start with to see whether they have a varicocele or if there's any other testing that they could do to kind of help prevent a woman going through all the unnecessary IVF treatment.
Right. Right. When you say it like that, I can't imagine anyone would not want to get tested. And you're right. I mean, it's really common. And a lot of guys who have lower counts, they might have a varicocele and it can be fixed if you have one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you created the 5-day fertility Kickstart challenge to help men take action. Would love to talk about it. What kinds of things do you recommend for someone who's just getting started?
So when I created the 5-day Kickstart challenge, I really thought about my own personal journey, what I did, what I didn't do, and every bit of advice I got from somebody. So I talked things about nutrition, mindset, sleep. There's some of the things I do discuss because they're so important topics that they all come together to play a huge part in terms of how can we help improve male reproductive health. There's a video that they get every day, and it's only a short video. That's because us men generally have a short attention span. So they'll go on, they'll log on, they'll sign up, and then they'll get a video. It's a couple of minutes every day for 5 days challenge. And it's just a way of creating some habits in terms of what can you do to move forward. So I'm hoping that will kind of help men in terms of making a start in terms of improving their reproductive health.
Yeah, 5 days, doable. 5 months, 5 weeks, not so much. So I think 5 days is great. I think it's a great program. And I want to talk about some of the myths or misunderstandings men have about fertility. What are some of the most common ones that you've seen?
So a lot of the myths, smoking doesn't cause any issues. My friend smoked for years and I've got a kid. I drink loads of alcohol. I may do drugs. I've still got kids. Everybody's different. And if we look at the world population now, it's declining rapidly. for so many different factors. And I think a lot of young people will say, I'm young, so therefore I've got, 20, 30 years, I can have a kid later on. Well, actually, that's not necessarily true. And equally, your partner has an egg reserve, and as women age, that decreases. So yes, guys can potentially, go into their 50s and 60s even to even have kids. But for women, there's the clock. They have a clock. And I think some of those myths around doing those bad habits, those bad lifestyles are actually quite damaging, because it sends the wrong message to everybody else to say, hey, I can do all these bad things and it's not going to impact me at all. As mentioned, oh, their friends have already got kids, so hey, don't worry about it. You can continue carrying on and do all these bad things. It makes no difference. Well, actually it does. And things like improving your lifestyle is an important factor. So when people say, I don't need to exercise, I don't need to eat well, I totally disagree with that
Yeah.
completely. It's so important to look after your body, look after yourself, look after your health. Science tells you how important it is. And I think once men and couples start acknowledging that, I think it's a positive start. Sometimes things are out of your control, but I think if you can make those small changes to improve your fertility, I think it'll be a wonderful step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you wish more people understood about male fertility? Not just the science, but the emotional impact as well.
Yeah, I think the emotional impact is can be some damaging to couples. I've seen couples go through infertility struggles and it damages their relationship. And that's really, really difficult, actually. Sometimes people will isolate themselves, which isn't great. Some people look at thinking, oh, there's shame around that. Science is wonderful today, but the emotional impact can be quite severe, because I've seen it where certain individuals can go down a very, very dark road where they do feel very isolated, particularly men. And that's because men generally don't speak about this. And if you're not speaking about this, then you should be finding somebody who you can confide in, preferably your partner, because you're together on the journey. But don't feel embarrassed about it. Maybe have a couple of beers first for your mates if you are out, and then that kind of warms you up. Say, hey, guess what? I've got a low sperm count. Make a joke about it if it's an icebreaker, because it's a way to, you'll be surprised actually. So, and I tell you why, because even myself, I've spoken to men in the past, and I don't want to say anything just in case they judge me. But when I say that, a couple of people said, do you know what, David? I've also struggled. I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that surprises me, to be honest, that
Yeah.
there are so many other men out there who are equally going through the struggles, but generally don't talk about it. So the emotional impact can be quite severe if you don't open up. And I think it's really important, particularly today, to start opening up. Women open up and talk about these things all the time, or most of the time. So I think they're good role models for their husbands to say, just go and speak about, go. You're not supposed to drink that much, but go and have a beer and talk about it, because it's really going to
Right.
help get it off your chest. And stress plays a big part in terms of that as well. So if you're not talking about it or acting in a certain way to improve it, then it can be quite lonely. So stay strong, keep going. That's the most important message
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. And just on a more personal level, when it's male factor, sometimes in laws can create more stress within the relationship. For example, let's say your parents asking your wife very intrusive, invasive questions about
Mm.
why don't you have kids? And sometimes the couple doesn't feel like it's anyone's business that it's really male factor. Do you have any advice around that? And if you have any advice to share about your own personal situation, about extended family and questions you guys got over the years?
Yeah, it's a really good question actually, because I think generally, I think the silent generation would predominantly think, the silent generation would, go, they would be at home, they'd be doing all the cooking, and the husbands would go to work, and they'd have the kids. And I guess that mindset is it would just happen that way. We're all conditioned in some way over the years throughout the generations. And I think my parents did actually ask me, oh, when are you guys going to have kids? Or they assumed we'd have kids very quickly. But I didn't feel comfortable saying that straight away to my folks, because it was not just personal to me, it was also personal to my wife. I know so many couples who haven't told their parents that they've been struggling to conceive, because it may look bad on the wife, because then the blame comes. The blame comes, oh, your wife can't give birth, not great, and that's really damaging. It's very damaging for you as a couple, and it's also very damaging for the wider family because the expectation is women should be able to have kids. Yes, fine, but not in all cases. But there never seems to be the case where parents will say, "Hey, son, are you the issue, or could you
Right.
be the issue?" It's more, "What's wrong with your wife?"
Right.
And I think that's a really bad message to put all that on a woman, to be honest, because in this day and age, it's not just the woman, it's not just your wife, it's you, the man. And the more this is spoken about, I think there's a lot more parents out there who are quite supportive. My parents, as an example, they're very supportive about the journey we've been on. And, sometimes I'd get quite emotional and talk to my mum about, why it hasn't worked or why, and she goes, don't give up hope. Sometimes
Oh,
she'll say, I'll go and pray for you. Everything will be fine. Don't worry. And I think sometimes when you hear those messages from your parents, it's actually really nice is that you do have support from your family.
right.
Parents shouldn't feel ashamed, or you shouldn't feel ashamed about sharing that with your family because they should be there to support you equally.
Right.
So I had those conversations with my mum. I know other people have had those conversations, and it's not been that great. I think it's great to involve everybody in the family in terms of the struggles that you're going through because it just makes them more aware. And I think the more
Right.
awareness is spread out there to our families, the more understanding they all have, and they'll appreciate that actually the issue could be you, not just your
Right.
partner.
Right. And if they love you, they'll support you, they'll be there for you, and they'll show
Absolutely,
up. And you just have to let them know how to show up and educate them about how to show up for you.
absolutely.
So, what's your hope for the future of male fertility awareness? If you could, you're obviously doing it, but what is your hope for the future?
I think early testing is going to be really key for this more than anything, actually. I also would like to see more support groups or tools for men, communities for men. I think the community thing is really important for men at the moment. So, behind the scenes, apart from my 5-day fertility Kickstart journey, if you're okay for me to share, I'm actually
Yes.
creating, almost finished actually, a course. And part of that is to then be part of the wider community where men can then talk to each other and share their own experiences through the struggles they've gone through. And I think the community thing is quite important for men to come together. So I think that care, whether it's going to see a counselor and being very open and transparent, I think that support group is going to be equally important as well.
Well, you have to let us know when you launch it so that we can share it as well, please.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm kind of in the final stages at the
Yeah.
moment. So it's going to be interesting though, Amy, because the 5-day Kickstart challenge is very quick, whereas the course I've almost created it's a lot longer,
Yeah.
but it's longer for a purpose because if you're very serious about not putting your wife through IVF and spending thousands of pounds up front, then you would do the course first. You would follow the course, complete the course, and by then you should be in a better state
Mhm.
to try and conceive naturally before having to spend so much money on wasted IVF treatments that you may not need,
Mhm.
and you're not putting your partner through all that unnecessary stress and emotion of going through that. So yeah, let's hope so.
What has your experience been like as a fertility patient going to these clinics? Is there anything that you would want those clinics to know now after all these years about what they could have done to make it better for you and your wife?
Wow, that's a really good question because being a patient going through our fertility journey, there was no focus on me whatsoever. It was all focused on my wife. All the questions are directed at my wife, which in some way I kind of felt a bit left out of the conversation because, I've already done my semen analysis tests. Yes, it's good, or no, it's bad. But then they would redirect it to my wife because they're like, okay, what else can we do for the wife to make it work? As opposed to thinking, what else can we do for the man to make that work first?
Right.
And that's one of the biggest flaws I see. Even today, I think there needs to be a slight shift. Maybe it's a mindset shift around what we do first. And I think because I've seen so many different consultants, I mentioned earlier, everyone has a different opinion or a different approach, but it's still not solely focused on let's try and fix what we
Mhm.
can for both couples first before we even think about putting somebody through this process. IVF's not cheap. It's very expensive. You
Right.
generally walk away, if you haven't been successful, with a lot of heartache. And
Right.
that's not great for anybody. You know, there's so much emphasis on the woman, the woman, the woman. But yes, the woman's got great eggs. But I look at it as, well, I use the car analogy,
Yeah.
because the egg, I say, is like the engine of a car, and the sperm is the fuel, the diesel or whatever you're using. And if that fuel isn't good enough, the egg can only do so much to improve it. But if you're
Right.
putting diesel in a petrol vehicle, it's not going to do anything.
Right.
So, so that to me is really fundamental in terms of having doctors explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, but then equally, what else can we look at before we even consider that approach? So I think there's still lots of biases out there in terms of, hey, we're the best fertility clinic, our success rates are amazing. What are your live birth rates look
Right.
like? That's key. So I still think there's a lot more that needs to happen.
Yeah. Well, I always say diagnosis before treatment is the egg whisperer way. And I always want to do everything I can to fix what the problems are before treatment so that if we end up needing treatment, we're putting ourselves in the best position to be as successful as possible. You can
Absolutely.
probably do a better job with that car analogy than me when it comes to diagnosis, but you don't want to put the wrong gas in the car when you're dealing with something that's so incredibly important, which is your future family.
Absolutely.
Well, David, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I would just like to say to couples who are still on their fertility journey, don't give up hope, because everybody has a different story, and there's so many different scenarios out there for each couple who are looking to have a family. I think, be open, be honest, get advice as soon as possible, speak to people as soon as possible, get tested as soon as possible, support your wife because she's going through so much more as well. So I think if you do all those things together, and have some hope, things will work out. Or you get to a stage where you're comfortable, and it sounds really difficult, but you will get to a place of comfort where things happen for a reason. And sometimes, if they're in your control, great. If they're out of your control, you can't do anything about it. But never give up hope is something I would say to people watching
Yeah.
and listening today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. David, thank you for sharing your story and your heart with us. You're bringing much needed awareness and compassion to a space that has left men out of the picture for far too long. To everyone listening, if you're navigating fertility, don't leave male health out of the conversation. Visit fertility4men.com, fertility, the number 4men.com, and check out David's 5-day fertility Kickstart challenge because fertility is a team effort, and it starts with being informed, supported, and seen. And before I sign off, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Egg Whisperer for more tips and support on your fertility journey. If you found today's episode helpful, please like and subscribe on YouTube and check out the Egg Whisperer Show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your reviews and shares mean the world to me, and they help more people find the fertility support they need. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.